Hello, how are you? I hope you're good. I don't remember if I've ever actually made this video or if I haven't still, but today I'm here, as you'll know from the title, to do one of those videos where I recommend you a book depending on the other book that you might have read. So, you know, if you like this, then you will like this kind of thing. I have 18 of them, so I'm not gonna go too into detail as to what each book is, obviously, otherwise we would be here forever. And as much as I would like to spend that much amount of time with you guys, I don't think you would have the same sentiment. You got lives. I have literally everything mixed into this. So I have young adult, I have adult books, I have graphic novels, I have sci-fi, I have fantasy, I have contemporary, and they're all just having good times. These are obviously just my opinions and my reasonings why I think you might enjoy the book if you enjoyed that one. And I'll probably mainly focus on the reason rather what the books are about, but hopefully that will still be clear. But also, this has been going on YouTube ever since I remember BookTube being a thing. So I don't know who started this, but whoever did, great idea. I really do enjoy those videos. Also, obviously, if you disagree or if you read both and you didn't like one, let me know. This is just a very generalized guess. There's gonna be so many reasons why people might dislike one book while still really enjoying the other, and you know, this is just a suggestion of maybe, perhaps, possibly you might enjoy that book. I don't know why I'm doing all these disclaimers, you guys know. Oh, also, one last thing. Some of these suggestions kind of only work one way. Most of them work both ways. Like, if you read this book, you might enjoy this one, but if you have read this one, you will also might enjoy this one. Some of them, however, only kind of go one way. If you read this one, then you might enjoy this one. I will explain when we get there. But anyway, if you have read Radio Silence by Alice Oseman, which is a story that focuses a lot on university and expectations and family and all sorts of dynamics and thinking for yourself, but also focuses on this online podcast that is very famous and this main character is very big fan of, and then she figures out kind of who is the person doing the podcast. Then you might really enjoy Eliza and Her Monsters, because this also focuses a lot on a person who runs a very famous online platform. This time it is about comics, which is our main character actually. She meets her interest and he seems to be very into the comic without knowing that she is running it. But this one also focuses a lot on depression and anxiety specifically. I actually really enjoyed the rep and the representation of that in here as a person with anxiety and depression. This one focuses more on depression as well. So these two are very compatible. I think this is definitely one of the strongest connections between the recommendations, because some of them I really should have stretched before I reached that far. And you'll see, but I mean, it's fun, so it's fine. But if you have enjoyed one or the other, you probably will like one or the other. Then we have Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, which is about this girl whose father has been named as a traitor and she wants to prove everyone wrong and get herself into a piloting academy, and she just uncovers a lot of stuff that's going on. But she has a very strong, very annoying type of Gryffindor personality, but it's kind of endearing. It grows on you, but it's supposed to be kind of annoying. And it really reminded me of another character that is very unapologetic as well, and it's also a sci-fi, and it's also set in this constrained colony, and that would be Artemis. This is by the same author that wrote Martian. People generally enjoyed this one a little bit less than a Martian, but I think that's just because the Martian was like so big. But I actually still enjoyed it. I listened to it on audiobook and it's really quite nice. It's about this very headstrong girl trying basically to save the colony on the moon. Stories have very different writing, but I do think that they both have very similar main character and also the setting up. Okay, now this next one is a connection that I do not claim any originality to, because it has been said before and not by me, but there's also gonna be a lot of people who are gonna disagree with it, mainly because one of the books in comparison is so well known. Well, they're both well known, but this one in particular is very well known, and obviously with so many people loving this one, there's gonna be a big amount of people who are not gonna like the other one. But I'm of course talking about Harry Potter. But if you enjoyed Harry Potter, especially when you're growing up, it has been drawn before. that obviously in many ways they're very different stories, but could be said about everything, you would hope. But the adult version, supposedly, for Harry Potter could be The Name of the Wind, which would make a lot of sense because I am such a big fan of both of these. Obviously, this is my favorite book, because this one I don't count because it's just on an entirely different realm. So both of these stories focus on the main character who loses his parents, and that is a big part of both of these stories. Here you have Harry going to Hogwarts, a magical school, and here you have Quoth going into a university of magic. So you can see sort of where the parallel is drawn. Obviously the writing style is entirely different. This goes from middle grade to YA, whilst this one is very much adult. However, the main character, we do start with him from probably a similar age as Harry was in the first book. So you do see him kind of growing up. And some might also say that the main character is a little bit similar, not only because of that like a little bit of a chosen vibe going on, but also they're both pretty cheeky sometimes, although I will say that Quoth is obviously like annoyingly so, but that's supposed to be the case because actually the story is told by himself and he's exaggerating a lot of his talents. I absolutely love both of these stories. However, I will say that I do think that not everyone's gonna like The Name of the Wind. It is very slow going, especially at the beginning. It took me a couple of attempts to actually go through it, but when I did, and oh my god, I loved it. The writing is also quite flowery in parts, so if you're not a fan of that, you might not enjoy it, but I had to mention it. Cruel Prince by Holly Black, and this is a story about two girls that are taken from their muggle homes and thrown into this, actually three, sorry, I keep forgetting the older one, and are thrown into the Fae world, which is very, very cruel and very backwards in a lot of aspects, and they get themselves tangled, well, the main character gets herself tangled into a lot of political stuff, but there's also this like strong romance happening, for like love to hate trope full on in here, and I thought it could be quite similar to Heartless, albeit very, very different at the same time. Heartless is by Marissa Meyer, and Heartless is a retelling of the Queen of Hearts and how she got so cold. But we start with this sweetheart, Catherine, who all she wants to do is just bake, but she's in the society that expects her to like marry on, I think, and carry the name of the family. It's actually been so long since I read it, but it's definitely retelling, and I think the cruelty of both of these Fae worlds is where I draw the comparison. I think if you enjoyed this, being angry at the world and being angry at the atmosphere and people outside our main character and just being like, what are you doing? Why are you doing? Why is it like that? And a lot of injustices and stuff like that, I think you would enjoy, if you enjoy the aspects of that in this one, you might enjoy it in Heartless as well. And both were really good reads in my opinion, so I feel like a toddler. Then I have a YA to adult recommendation. So I personally think that if you enjoyed Six of Crows or Cricket Kingdom, because I enjoyed Cricket Kingdom just way more than Six of Crows, so I like to include that. Which Six of Crows is a story about all of these outcasts of society coming together to perform a heist, and then heist goes terribly wrong, but it's very character driven. But also, like, there's a lot of action as well, but it's pretty much character driven story. I think that if you enjoyed this, you will really enjoy the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson, because this also focuses on a heist. This is more the character, the heist members are also pretty much outcast in some senses of society. There are some younger characters in here as well that are pretty similar to some of these Six of Crows characters as well. Final Empire is all about this world where the actual political tyranny is awful, and there's a whole cast of people just being treated horribly. Basically, in short, it's slavery. And we have these super talented but also kind of funky characters coming together to try and overturn that. The magic system could not be more different in here, but I do think that they both stories obviously focus on the heist. Both stories really focus on the kind of kingdom or the land or the empire, and also I think both stories do really emphasize the characters. So I do think if you have read Six of Crows, you will enjoy Mistborn, and you would probably enjoy Six of Crows if you read Mistborn and loved it, but this is one of those pairings that I think would be better if you read Six of Crows and haven't read the Mistborn, because I do think that Mistborn is better than that, so you might be a bit disappointed going to Six of Crows, although they are obviously still very, very different. Now this one is a fairly simple comparison actually. So we have A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is at the core, the beginning at least of it. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling where this girl is taken from her poor family and she is taken by the beast and held in the mansion and is basically made to slowly fall in love with the beast. It does really take a massive turn away from the retelling, especially in the second book. But then we also have A Curse So Dark and Lonely, and I do think that if you enjoyed one, you probably will enjoy the other. I personally enjoyed Curse So Dark and Lonely so much more than this one, although I do think that when I read A Court of Mist and Fury, it was just a really good time. I read it at the right time. I think if I reread it now, I probably would completely ruin it for myself and kind of probably hate it, but at the time that I read it, it was everything that I needed, and it was just perfect timing. So I still have fond memories of that. But then there's A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which also has a very strong female lead, which I think probably is a bit stronger than Farah. And she also has, is this cerebral palsy? She has some physical disability, but she is so determined to help everyone that she can, and that I enjoy the writing style of this much more. I think the writing style is what really stood out for me from this book, and I'm very excited to get into the second one when the owls roll on, because the writing is so short and to the point, and I just really appreciated it. I flew through that book. It was just a really good time, and obviously both stories have some focus on the romance as well, and you have like this growing kind of hate to love thing in both of them. Then I have a couple of parallels for Alice in Wonderland. I feel like I do not need to explain what Alice in Wonderland is to you. Wonky and full of symbolism and parallels and whatnot. It's kind of like a fever dream of a book. But if you enjoyed that kind of thing, you will like The Starless Sea. The Starless Sea, what is it even about? I think it's supposed to be about this bond between the two people, but it's just completely... This whole section is a little bit difficult because I do not like Alice in Wonderland, and I did not like this book or the next one that I will mention. But that does not mean that it's a bad book. It's just not for my personal taste, and I'm recommending this because I think this is a good book. It's just not a good book for me, and that's totally fine, obviously. But The Starless Sea follows this guy that finds a book in a library that has a chapter that's basically written about him, and he then goes investigating what and how. And that sounds amazing. That sounds like it's gonna be my favorite book ever. And that is what I thought going into it. But the writing is extremely purple. It's so flowery. It's too much for me personally, but if you do love that kind of fever dream and gems and, you know, putting dots together, to me it's either I absolutely love that or I hate it, because it's such a thin line for me from cringing personally of that and something being so like engulfing that I just can't live and just need to breathe the story. Unfortunately, this wasn't for me, but a lot of people love it, and I can absolutely see why. This is not a character-based book though, and I do think that the romance was very flimsy, even from those who liked it. I think they also agree on that one. But it is very beautifully described in some places. It's very vivid, very atmospheric, and I do think that if you are a massive fan of Alice in Wonderland, you might really like this one as well. Similarly, if you like the Alice in Wonderland, you like Every Heart a Doorway, because this one is basically about, it's kind of like a murder mystery of kids that come back from these places like Wonderland. These teenagers come back from places like Wonderland and Narnia and things like that, but kind of a bit more gory and not as fun for the most part. Okay, I have a couple of sci-fis. I actually have some more later on as well. But if you enjoyed Illumina, which is basically a very interesting design of a book, it's all logs and security footage and AI monologues, and it's told very interestingly. It's basically a collection of files, and you have to figure out what happened to this crew in space. There's a colony that is attacked, and you don't know what's happening, and you have to flee, and you follow the characters that flew away from the colony and surviving. But there's a lot of stuff going on. It's a very intriguing book, similarly, in my opinion, to Sleeping Giants. Very different stories, but both sci-fi. This one is set on Earth, however, or it starts off at least, but there's definitely some weird, you know, doesn't quite add up scientifically with our technology kind of findings on this one. And we follow our main character who as a kid fell into this hole and fell into onto rather this giant metal hand, and the hand is made of the metal that really just predates Earth and is just all sorts of weird. And when she grows up, she joins the team trying to discover the rest of the parts. The reason why I'm adding these together is not because they're just sci-fis, but main reason is actually, well, one, that is kind of really intriguing and you can fly through both of them because of their format. Because this one is not as colorful and weird as Illumina maybe, but it's also just done in interviews, so there's literally no paragraphs, it's just dialogue. That is the main parallel between those two. However, if you did enjoy Sleeping Giants, you would also probably enjoy Descender, one of my absolute favorite comic series, and this is because of the theme rather than the format. Obviously this is a book, this is a comic. Just to show you, this is how the artwork looks like in this one. This one is mainly kind of for the story because this one obviously has this sleeping giant metal structure, and this one is actually all about this planet that gets attacked by, you guessed it, giant metal robot thing. And then we kind of fast forward and trying to find out what happened, and we follow a little AI boy actually. So that is the main connection between these two, other than also both are brilliant stories, so I recommend. Oh, she came to say hello. Hello boy. Okay, bye. Then we have another pretty easy one, and this one is if you liked Adventure Zone, or to be honest, well, this is a Adventure Zone comic book, but to be honest, if you like this or any other D&D type of thing, you will probably like Kings of the Wild. Obviously, none of these are as a rule because I personally wasn't the biggest fan. I didn't hate it by any means, but thank you, Zeus. I think majority people would enjoy this a lot if they like D&D, because this is basically a D&D campaign. I'm not gonna linger on these two because I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's an adventure. Both of these things are an adventure. Both of these things are pretty funny as well. Now my next pairing is actually pretty weird and probably one of the biggest reaches maybe. But I honestly do think that if you have enjoyed The Darkest Shade of Magic, which is all about these secret doors, which you would think I would maybe pair with the Starless Sea because they have secret doors. In this world we have Antari who can create doors and travel between different type of Londons. But there's also a book about heroism and sacrifice and trying to protect your world from like this imminent doom and opposing enemies that do not seem like enemies. And the main connecting factor for me for this book and the one that I'm going to recommend is the magic system, which in this one in particular is pretty much an elemental magic. And I know that he's trying to find the camera. Hello? And I know that Schwab actually said that she was inspired a lot by the series that I'm going to mention, which obviously at first is a TV show, but they now have a book, and I actually read it and I actually really liked it, which I wasn't kind of expecting. But The Rise of Kyoshi is a prequel to the TV show, and it follows Avatar Kyoshi, who can bend all of the elements basically, but she also struggles. So not only is the magic system obviously similar, but I also think that the ferocity of the characters and the loyalty and the battle for your land and for the good really is what connects these. And I do think that the writing style is a little bit similar as well, but I might be tripping because I've read this one very long time ago. Okay, now the next one is also a connection that I have seen before, so I didn't make it myself. But if you like the Nevernight Chronicles by Jay Kristoff, which is basically this assassin training badass main character, a lot of killings involved type of vibe, you will also love Red Sister. But actually this is one of the ones that seems to go only one way, so you're more likely to enjoy Red Sister if you read Nevernight and liked it. But if you already read Red Sister, you might not be the biggest fan of Nevernight, because apparently Red Sister, according to some, is just a better version of Nevernight, but obviously it's gonna be personal preference. I am this much in Red Sister, which is scary because I need to be finished like ASAP with it. so far I can neither confirm or deny, because I did enjoy Nevernight, but the writing style is pretty jarring. I find this one much easier to read, even though, although I suppose they're both adult technically, aren't they? J. Christoph has a very specific way of storytelling in this particular book, but I don't know yet which one I like better, because I'm only like 80 pages in this one. But because so many people told me this, I thought I will include it here in case you want to. Both are like assassins. There's a school of training assassins, murders, that kind of thing. Okay, next one. So if you have enjoyed Renegades, which is basically a superhero versus villain factions story, where we have renegades and then we have anarchists, and one is bad and one is good, but actually it's obviously more complicated than that, and maybe good is bad and maybe everyone is just a little bit of both. And I think kind of the same sentiment goes for This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab, sorry, V.E. Schwab. I have this place separated into, and there's monsters on one side and there's humans on other, and they're obviously at the end of it you don't know which ones are actual monsters and which ones are not, because you have POVs and point of views from both sides of opposing forces in both of these books. I personally prefer this one, but I do think that if you liked either or, you might be a fan of the other one as well. Okay, we're almost there. So the next two books actually don't have too much in common other than this like general feel. I have another one similar, but anyway, first of all, if you liked We Are the Ants, which is basically this kind of like story about mental health and also hope and your place in the world, and is the world like worth living for kind of book, but it's more like a contemporary with the sense with the main character thinking that he is being abducted by aliens, and there's a button for him to press if he wants to destroy the whole of humanity. It is kind of left for you to decide if you think this is obviously mental health or if you think that this is real, up to you. So it could be a sci-fi or it could be a contemporary. But then there's also The Loneliest Girl in the Universe, which is about a girl who is then kind of left alone in this spaceship because she loses her family, and then there's a lot of time for her to think, and there's a lot of time for her to think about, you know, is the world worth living in, and the absolute loneliness and what it brings, and what then, and how easy it is to make and to force a connection with someone, and how grateful you are for that connection, how easy it is to oversee some things when you're lonely. And I think both of these books were pretty okay. I did enjoy both of them, but I do think that if you read either one, you might enjoy the other one as well. Now, the next one, again, is kind of more of a feel rather than like a proper connection, but we have We Are Legion, which is basically about a guy who signs up for this hypothetical, basically, study about if he dies and his memories can be saved, and or his body can be saved until they can revive it. And then after he signs up for that, he gets hit by a car and dies, and then he wakes up. He wakes up as a computer, and then I don't want to say too much about it because things like escalate, but it's a very, again, kind of lonely, like a lot of time to think about, and also self-replicating drone, different personalities, and like what constitutes as human, and where does the machine and a human start, and are you alive kind of thing, which is very, very different from we'll save galaxy for food. I can't even believe I'm putting these close to one another, because We'll Save Galaxy for Food is basically about this planet where there hasn't been a war in a while, so a lot of these pilots, wartime pilots, are now just kind of glorified taxi people. So it's kind of probably drawing a parallel between people who served in the army and are veterans, and they come back and there's not much for them to do, and they're actually kind of starving and like really struggling to provide for the families and stuff like that. He agrees to this kind of like a little bit of a dodgy mission because obviously payment. And so there's literally like nothing really that similar between the stories other than it's sci-fi, but there's just that feeling of using your humor as coping mechanism, because one is in like a really weird damn situation where he's just talking to himself constantly and just making fun of things, but like just like kind of a ironic, dark sense of humor. And then there's another one that's also seeing the world as just being so petty and just so tired, but like seeing funny bits and things. And so it is the humor and the kind of sense of, well, shit, you know, that really ties these two together for me. So I do really think that if you enjoy one, you'll enjoy the other, and I really like both of them. And I feel like it's been a while since I talked about either, so I want to also just throw it out there as well. Okay, this one absolutely only works one way, and in particular, if you liked Invictus, which is the story about a time-jumping crew that need to save the universe because something bad happened and like this massive vortex of nothingness starting to eat up the history. If you like this one, which I thought was pretty mediocre, and I probably only enjoyed it for the theme. So if you like the theme and you actually like this one, you will definitely, I think, will like Dark Matter. So Dark Matter, I always recommend this because I thought it was really good. I know there's a lot of criticism over the main character being very, very basic. It's just a basic white man, which is absolutely true. But the story is not character-based, so I could not care less. And I am a character-driven person, but I just love the theme of this so much. I don't want to say too much about it because I think it's very much of a go and experience it yourself kind of book, but I do think if you like this, you will love this. If you have read this and not read this, I would say not bother with this one. So it's a little bit of a weird one, but I feel like if I haven't read this before this, I might have enjoyed this more, if you know what I mean. Just read Dark Matter, basically. And I only have one left now, although I feel like this is going to be already be pretty long. This one is a little bit different. So on one hand, we have The Lightning Struck Heart, which is a hilarious, extremely very adult humor book about a gay wizard apprentice with a gay-ass unicorn. They're both very thirsty. And it's very funny. I definitely highly recommend the audiobook, but also if you like that kind of humor, and you will know what kind of humor I'm talking about after just listening to like a chapter of it. I tried to listen to the second one, but actually it was kind of like a lot of the same stuff, so I didn't find it as fun. So I would kind of recommend this as a standalone. Is pretty good at finishing the book, so I don't think that there was a need for a second one, but definitely recommend if you like that kind of humor. It's very sexualized and it is very gay if you're looking for something like that as well. And then we have, on the other hand, we have one that is definitely way more PG, I suppose. And that one's called Off to Be a Wizard, and it's basically about this guy that finds a code of time travel and travels back in time, and because of all his technology knowledge, he is perceived as a wizard. He's also chased from his current timeline, so he can't really come back because I think the banks think that he committed fraud or something. It's very kind of lighthearted and it's very fun, both of these stories. Like, they obviously cover some things, but it's basically like for fun. So if you're looking for something like that, and if you like one or the other, although I don't know how many people have read either, but these are like some fun stories, and obviously they have wizards in common. One is not really real and the other one is just fun. But yeah, that's about everything. Let me know if you agree of any of these pairings, if you read both of the books in the category, and more importantly, if you found one that you want to read because of this recommendation. That would be so cool. Obviously you might not like it, but I hope that you do, and I hope you enjoyed this video. There's not that many days until Owls now, so I hope you guys are ready, because I sure am not technically, because I need to read my sister, but other than that, I'm ready. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Stay awesome, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!